The Viridian Empire's central auction house gleamed with the kind of sterile corporate aesthetics that tried very hard to hide what actually happened inside. Captain Marcus Webb stood in the back of the bidding hall, his civilian clothes feeling wrong against his skin, his stomach churning with revulsion that had nothing to do with the recycled air. The facility dressed everything up in business terminology: labor contracts, service agreements, voluntary indenture programs, but everyone here knew exactly what this was. A slave market operating in the legal gray zones where galactic civilization pretended not to see. Marcus was here on intelligence gathering, theoretically. His ship, the Meridian's Hope, had intercepted encrypted transmissions 3 weeks ago suggesting the Viridian Empire was trafficking people from conflict zones, processing them through these auction houses, and selling them to buyers across multiple sectors. Earth Alliance wanted confirmation before escalating diplomatically. Marcus, who ran independent freight contracts but maintained good relationships with Alliance intelligence, had volunteered to investigate. Now, watching actual people stand on actual platforms while auctioneers recited their qualifications, like they were describing cargo specifications, Marcus was certain that investigate was about to become intervene in ways that would probably destroy his relationship with Alliance intelligence forever. The crowd was a nightmare catalog of wealth without conscience. Corporate representatives seeking cheap specialized labor, wealthy collectors looking for exotic household staff. And worse, people whose expressions when looking at the beings on those platforms made Marcus's hands clench into fists. The auctioneer, a Viridian with the kind of professional smooth manner that probably helped him sleep at night, was working through his catalog with practiced efficiency. A young Vorlani male, skilled in data analysis, sold to a tech corporation for 80,000 credits. 2 Zenthari siblings, experienced in environmental maintenance, sold as a pair for 120,000 credits. A human woman, which made Marcus's rage spike hotter, with medical training, sold to a private collector for 95,000 credits, and Marcus made himself memorize the buyer's face for later reporting, even though he knew the Alliance couldn't do anything without causing diplomatic incidents. Then she was brought out, and the room's energy shifted. She was Sithari, a species Marcus recognized from diplomatic briefings he'd reviewed while running cargo through their territorial space. Tall and graceful, probably around 1.9 meters, with that distinctive elegant build and those long, curved ears that swept back from her skull in elegant arcs. Her skin was pale silver, catching the harsh auction lighting in ways that made her look almost ethereal despite the deliberately degrading circumstances. She wore the standard presentation clothing the auction house provided, minimal, designed to display merchandise for buyer evaluation. But what Marcus noticed most wasn't her appearance. It was her eyes. Violet, striking, and filled with a rage so intense it practically radiated across the room. Despite whatever had brought her here, despite being on a platform being sold like property, she hadn't been broken. Not completely. The auctioneer launched into his pitch with the enthusiasm of someone describing a particularly valuable asset. Lot 47, Sithari female, age 27 standard years. Educated to tertiary level in cultural studies and xenolinguistics. Fluent in 8 languages including Viridian Common, Sithari High Protocol, and Earth Standard English. Previously employed in diplomatic contexts, highly skilled in protocol and social navigation. The subtext was absolutely clear and made Marcus want to burn the building down. Suitable for personal service, entertainment hosting, or private diplomatic assistance. The auctioneer smiled in a way that made Marcus's skin crawl. Starting bid, 50,000 credits. The room erupted with signals. Buyers all along the hall raising their bidding paddles, some eagerly, some with calculated casualness, all of them treating a person's autonomy as something purchasable. Marcus watched her face, seeing the moment her defiance cracked slightly as the bids climbed. 60,000. 75,000, 100,000 credits. Each increase was someone claiming ownership of her future, her body, her choices. The reality of her situation was written clearly in how her shoulders tensed, how those elegant ears angled back in what his hasty cultural research suggested was fear or despair. At 150,000 credits, the bidding slowed. Only 5 serious contenders remained. A Viridian corporate executive whose expression made Marcus want to punch him, 2 wealthy private collectors whose species Marcus didn't recognize, a Zenthari whose people had documented histories of labor exploitation, and Marcus himself. He'd entered the bidding on pure instinct somewhere around 70,000 credits, before his rational brain could talk him out of it. Every credit he was offering represented money he didn't actually have in liquid form. He was mentally liquidating repair funds, pulling from crew salary accounts, with the certainty that his crew would understand, but also knowing this was financial insanity. 175,000, 200,000. The collectors dropped out, leaving Marcus, the corporate executive, and the Zenthari. Marcus's heart was pounding loud enough that he wondered if the people around him could hear it. On the platform, she was trembling, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on some point on the far wall like she was trying to disappear into her own mind. 225,000. The Zenthari dropped out with a disgusted gesture. Just Marcus and the corporate executive now, and the executive was eyeing him with open irritation. Clearly someone used to getting what he wanted, unused to competition from someone in civilian clothes who didn't advertise wealth. 250,000 credits, the executive said smoothly, his paddle raised with confident finality. Marcus felt his crew's future financial stability crumbling in real time, felt his own bank accounts screaming in protest, felt the absolute certainty that if he let this executive win, he'd never forgive himself for witnessing this moment and doing nothing. 275,000 credits, Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the auction hall with an authority he didn't feel. The executive's head snapped around, assessing him with narrowed eyes. On the platform, her gaze finally broke from that fixed point, finding Marcus in the crowd. Their eyes met across the distance, and he saw confusion there alongside the fear and rage. She didn't understand why someone would bid this high. Didn't understand what was happening. 280,000, the executive countered, his tone hardening. 300,000 credits, Marcus said immediately, and the room went quiet. It was an absurd amount for a labor contract, well beyond what most of these transactions commanded. The executive stared at him, calculating whether this was worth an escalating financial commitment. The auctioneer waited, professional eagerness barely concealed. Finally, the executive lowered his paddle with visible anger, shooting Marcus a look that promised future problems. 300,000 credits going once, the auctioneer called, his voice carrying that artificial enthusiasm. Going twice, sold, to the human gentleman in Section 7. Marcus felt sick, he just bought a person. The fact that he had no intention of treating her as property didn't change the fundamental horror of what had just occurred, the transaction that had just been legitimized by his participation. Administrative staff appeared to guide him to processing, a euphemistic term for where you take possession of your purchase. He followed them to a private room that the auction house had thoughtfully furnished with chairs and a small table, like this was a normal business meeting rather than the transfer of one person's ownership of another. They brought her in moments later, no longer on the platform but still in that minimal clothing, a Viridian attendant walking her through the door with the kind of carefully neutral expression that probably helped them sleep at night. The attendant set down a data pad on the table, legal documentation, ownership transfer forms, care instructions, like she was equipment rather than a person. "Your purchase, sir," the attendant said with professional courtesy. "All documentation is on the pad, if you have questions about maintenance or optimal usage." "Get out," Marcus said flatly. The attendant blinked, surprised. Sir, I'm required to explain the terms of. Get out. Marcus's voice went hard with barely controlled rage. Or I'm going to do something that will definitely violate your facility's conduct policies. The attendant left hastily, clearly deciding this wasn't worth whatever commission they earned. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Marcus alone with a woman who'd just been sold to him for 300,000 credits. She stood there, trembling, fear or rage or exhaustion or all three simultaneously. Her ears were angled back, her posture defensive but resigned. And then she spoke, her voice hollow and defeated in ways that made Marcus's chest hurt. You paid for me. Now do it. The words came out flat, practiced like she'd said them before or heard them said to others. Do whatever you're going to do. I won't fight. I'm too tired to fight. She was steeling herself for assault, Marcus realized with horrified clarity, preparing for whatever violation she assumed came next, because that's what her experience had taught her to expect. Whatever you want, she continued when he didn't immediately respond, her voice getting smaller. Just get it over with. Marcus felt something crack in his chest, seeing her try to make herself smaller, try to accept the unacceptable, because resistance had probably only made things worse in the past. This was the moment that would define everything. His next words would either reinforce every trauma that had brought her to this auction, or they'd begin something different. He took a careful step backward, increasing the distance between them rather than decreasing it. What's your name? She stared at him like he'd spoken in a language her translator couldn't process. What? Your name, Marcus repeated gently, taking another step back to give her more space. Not your auction designation or identification number. Your actual name, the one you had before all this. Her confusion deepened, violet eyes searching his face for the trap, for the angle, for whatever this was leading to. Why do you want to know my name? Because before we go any further with anything, I need to know who I'm talking to. He gestured to the chairs the auction house had thoughtfully provided. I'm Marcus Webb. I'm a cargo captain with the independent freighter Meridian's Hope, registered out of Earth Alliance space. And you are. She didn't move toward the chairs, still watching him with the wariness of someone who'd learned that kindness was often a prelude to cruelty. Thissa, she said finally, the name coming out cautiously. Thissa Velener, formerly of House Velener on Sithar Prime before, she stopped, her jaw tightening, before it stopped mattering. It matters, Marcus said firmly, Thissa Velener. It's good to meet you, though I wish it was under literally any other circumstances. He gestured again to the chairs. Will you sit with me? I need to explain some things. You don't need to explain anything. Her voice carried that hollow quality again. You bought me. You own me legally under Viridian law. Just tell me what you want and I want to give you these. Marcus pulled out the data pad the attendant had left, the one containing all the legal documentation of his ownership rights, and extended it toward her. These are yours. Thissa stared at the pad like it might explode. I don't understand. That pad contains your contract, your identification documents, everything the auction house processed. He kept it extended toward her, willing her to take it. It's yours. You should have control over the documentation of your own legal status. Why would you give that to me? She still hadn't moved to take it, confusion and suspicion warring in her expression. Because the Meridian's Hope is registered under Earth Alliance jurisdiction, Marcus explained, keeping his voice calm and clear. Earth Alliance law doesn't recognize involuntary servitude in any form, hasn't for centuries. The second you step onto my ship, you're under Alliance legal protection. These Viridian contracts become void the moment you're in Alliance space. He set the pad on the table between them since she wouldn't take it. You'd be legally free. The silence that followed was so complete Marcus could hear the environmental systems humming. Thissa was staring at him like he was speaking another language, her ears angled in what looked like complete confusion. Then she laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to etch glass. Free to what? To be dumped at the nearest station with nothing. Free to be recaptured by Veridian authorities who'll just process me through another auction. Free to choose, Marcus interrupted firmly. Where you go, what you do, who you are. Actually free, with my help getting you wherever you want to be safely. Why? The word came out sharp, almost angry. Why would you do that? You spent, the auctioneer said, 300,000 credits. Why would anyone spend that much money just to free someone they don't even know? It was a fair question, one Marcus had been asking himself since he'd started bidding. Because someone needed to, he said simply. Because I watched that auction and saw dozens of people being sold like cargo, and every single one of them looked beaten down except you. You were still angry, still fighting even though you were on that platform. And I thought, he stopped, collecting his thoughts. I thought if someone with that much strength was being sold like property, then this galaxy is more broken than I realized. You deserved better than what was about to happen to you. This's ears shifted slightly, angling forward in what Marcus's hasty research suggested might mean interest or emotional response. You don't know anything about me. I could be dangerous. I could be a criminal. Are you? No, she admitted quietly. She stopped, jaw working. I was a diplomatic aide for my house before the coup, before everything fell apart and I ended up, her hands clenched. This is the third time I've been sold. Each time I told myself I'd escape. Each time I didn't. So no, I'm not dangerous. I'm just someone who lost everything and couldn't figure out how to get it back. Then let me help you start getting it back, Marcus said. No strings, no expectations, just help. She was studying him with those violet eyes, searching for the lie, the ulterior motive, the inevitable betrayal. Marcus made himself stay still, letting her look, letting her assess. What do you get out of this? She asked finally. The knowledge that I did something right in a galaxy that makes doing the right thing really difficult. He met her gaze steadily. Look, I'm not going to pretend I'm some perfect altruist. I'm angry about this whole system. I'm angry that places like this exist. I'm angry that dozens of people got sold tonight, and I could only afford to help one. And maybe helping you is partly about trying to balance some cosmic scale that I know doesn't actually balance. But mostly. He smiled slightly. I have a sister back on Earth who's about your age, and if she ever ended up in a situation like this, I'd pray that someone somewhere would help her. So I'm helping you. That's it. That's the entire complicated motive. Thissa was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through emotions Marcus couldn't quite read. Finally, she moved toward the table, picked up the data pad with trembling hands, and scrolled through the documents displayed there. Her ownership contract, her identification with property of Marcus Webb stamped across it, the legal terms of his purchase. You're really saying these become void once I'm on your ship? Her voice was small, careful, like she was afraid hoping too hard would shatter the possibility. The second you cross into Alliance jurisdiction, yes. Earth Alliance doesn't recognize these contracts as legally binding. You'd be a free person under Alliance law, with all the rights and protections that entails. And then what? You drop me at the nearest Alliance station and wish me luck. I'll help you get wherever you want to go, Marcus corrected. Do you have family somewhere, friends, anywhere you'd want to relocate? She shook her head slowly. My family is gone. The coup, House Velener, was destroyed. I don't know who survived or where they'd be. Then we'll figure it out together. Find you somewhere safe, help you get established, make sure you have resources. He paused. Or if you wanted to stay on the Meridian's Hope for a while, as crew or as passenger, you'd be welcome. No obligation, just an option. Why would you let me stay on your ship? Because you need somewhere safe while you figure out what comes next, and my ship is safe. Marcus shrugged. Also, frankly, having someone fluent in 8 languages, including Sithari High Protocol, would be incredibly useful for a cargo captain trying to navigate diplomatic situations I barely understand. But that's only if you want. If you'd rather I help you settle somewhere completely away from me, that's fine too. Your choice. Entirely your choice. The words, your choice, seemed to hit her physically. Her ears angled sharply forward, and her eyes went bright with something that might have been tears. No one's given me a choice in 3 years, she whispered. Not once. Everything's been decided for me, done to me without asking. And you're just handing me choices like they're normal. They should be normal, Marcus said firmly. Autonomy should be the default, not the exception. I'm sorry it's been 3 years since someone treated you like you have the right to decide things about your own life. She was crying now, tears running down her silver skin, her shoulders shaking. Marcus stayed where he was, resisting the instinct to comfort, knowing that unwanted touch right now would be the opposite of helpful. I don't understand you, Thissa said through tears. I don't understand why you do this, but she took a shaking breath. I choose your ship. I choose to stay, at least for now, while I figure things out, if that's really okay. It's for the obvious reasons. Thissa walked close to him but not touching, her posture still defensive, still waiting for the trap even though he'd given her every assurance. The walk through the station to where his ship was docked felt eternal, Marcus hyper-aware of every person who looked at them, every security camera that tracked their movement. Thissa was wearing standard station clothes now. Marcus had insisted they stop at a general supply store to get her actual coverage before leaving. But she still moved like someone expecting attack from any direction. The Meridian's Hope was a mid-sized freight vessel, nothing fancy but well-maintained, comfortable for its crew of 4. Marcus had sent a coded message ahead to his first officer Chen, explaining in brief what had happened, and Chen had apparently briefed the rest of the crew because when they boarded, no one looked surprised or asked uncomfortable questions. Thissa, this is Chen, my first officer, Marcus introduced, and Chen nodded greeting with careful respect. Rodriguez, our medic, and Yuki, who keeps this ship running despite my best efforts to break it. Welcome aboard, Chen said simply, their expression neutral and professional. Captain's filled us in on the basics. We're glad you're here. Thissa's ears angled uncertainly, like she was still processing that this was real. Thank you for having me. Rodriguez, would you show Thissa to the guest quarters? Make sure she has everything she needs. The medic nodded. Of course. This way, please. Fair warning, our guest quarters are pretty basic, but they're private and comfortable. As Rodriguez led Thissa away, Marcus caught Chen's expression, concern mixed with approval. 300,000 credits, Captain. Chen said quietly once they were alone. That's everything we had saved for the next refit. I know. We're going to be running lean for a while. I know. Chen studied him for a moment, then smiled slightly. Worth it, though, you did good. Thanks, let's hope she agrees once the shock wears off. But even as he said it, Marcus knew he'd made the only choice his conscience would allow. The financial consequences would be painful, sure. But watching Thissa walk off that auction platform, free, making her own choices about where to go and what to do, that was worth any amount of credits. The first week was difficult in ways Marcus hadn't fully anticipated. Thissa moved through the ship like a ghost, occupying minimal space, speaking only when directly addressed, eating her meals in rapid silence before retreating to her quarters. She was waiting, Marcus realized, waiting for the trap to spring, waiting for his kindness to reveal its actual cost, waiting for the reality that her experience had taught her always eventually arrived. His crew gave her space while remaining consistently welcoming, Chen offering navigational tutorials when Thissa showed interest in the bridge systems, Rodriguez mentioning casually that medical was always available if needed, Yuki making terrible engineering jokes that sometimes got small smiles. But Thissa remained guarded, her elegant ears angled back more often than forward, her posture defensive even during casual conversation. Marcus caught her in the cargo bay on day 5, standing among the shipping containers they were hauling, staring out the small viewport at stars streaming past in faster-than-light transit. Can't sleep? He asked softly, announcing his presence from several meters away. She didn't turn. I keep expecting to wake up back at the auction house, or back with one of the previous owners. Like this is too good to be real, so it must not be real. It's real, Marcus said, staying where he was rather than approaching. You're here, you're free, that's not changing. You keep saying that, free. But I don't know what that means anymore. She finally turned to face him and her expression was exhausted. For 3 years every decision has been made for me, where I go, what I do, what I wear, what I say, when I eat, when I sleep, everything controlled by whoever owned me at the time. And now you're telling me I can just decide things for myself. I don't even know where to start. Marcus moved slightly closer, careful not to crowd her. Start small. What do you want for breakfast tomorrow? She blinked, confused by the question. What? Breakfast? What would you like? I can program the galley synthesizer for Sithari nutritional requirements if you tell me your preferences. I haven't been asked about food preferences in years. I eat whatever I'm given. Not on my ship. On my ship you get to have preferences. So think about it tonight and tomorrow morning tell me what you want. One small choice, we'll build from there. Over the following days, he implemented that philosophy consistently. What did she want to do with her time? Learn ship systems, study navigation, help with cargo inventory, or just rest? Where in the ship did she feel most comfortable? The observation deck, the small library Chen maintained, her own quarters. Did she want company during meals or prefer solitude? Each question seemed to surprise her, like the concept of her preferences mattering was foreign. But gradually, she started answering, started making small choices, started looking slightly less like she was waiting for punishment for daring to have opinions. 2 weeks in, Chen found her on the bridge during third shift, when the ship was on autopilot and most crews slept. Thissa was studying the navigation displays with intense focus, her ears angled forward in what Marcus had learned meant interest or concentration. Interested in navigation? Chen asked, settling into the co-pilot seat. I used to help plot diplomatic routes, Thissa said quietly, for my house, before everything fell apart. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed the mathematics of it. Want to learn our systems? I could use someone who understands the math. Captain's great at many things, but navigation calculations make him grumpy. Thissa's ears shifted, angling uncertainly. You teach me, even though I'm not actually crew, You're here, you're interested, and you're clearly smart enough to understand complex systems. Chen interrupted pragmatically. That's all the qualification you need. Unless you don't want to learn, your choice. I'd like to learn, Thissa said, and something in her voice sounded almost hopeful. Chen became her informal mentor after that, teaching her the Meridian's navigation systems, including her in route planning, asking her opinion on optimal trajectories. Rodriguez recruited her help with medical inventory after discovering Thissa had a systematic mind and organizational skills that made their chaotic supply system actually functional. Even Yuki drew her into conversations about ship maintenance, appreciating her questions and her willingness to learn. Marcus watched her gradually relax into the ship's rhythms, her defensive posture easing, her ears spending more time in forward or neutral positions. She started smiling occasionally, the expression transforming her features from guarded to radiant. She laughed at Yuki's terrible engineering puns, the sound tentative at first but growing stronger. A month in, she found Marcus in his quarters during evening cycle, knocking tentatively on his open door. Can I come in? Of course, he gestured to the second chair in his small office space. Everything okay? I want to tell you my story, she said, settling carefully into the chair. You've been patient, not asking, but I think I need to tell someone. And you're the one who gave me back my choice to tell or not tell. So I'm choosing to tell. I'm listening, Marcus said simply, giving her his full attention. The story came out haltingly at first, then faster as she found her rhythm. House Velener had been a minor noble family on Sithar Prime, focused on diplomatic work and cultural exchange. Thissa had been trained from youth in protocol and languages, preparing for a life of service to her people. Then a political coup had destroyed the existing power structure, and her house, aligned with the old regime, had been targeted. "I escaped," she said, her ears angling back with the memory. "Barely. My parents stayed behind to buy time for younger members of the house to flee. I don't know if they survived." Her voice went hollow. "I ended up on a transport ship heading out sector, thinking I'd reach Alliance space and request asylum. But the ship was intercepted by raiders. They sold us to traffickers who specialized in recruiting for the labor markets." She'd been sold 3 times over 3 years. First to a Viridian corporate executive who'd wanted a status symbol, an educated Sithari to demonstrate his wealth and cultured taste. When she'd resisted his attempts at intimacy, he'd sold her to a mining operation as punishment. The mining operation had been brutal, forcing her into dangerous work until she'd nearly died from exposure. They'd sold her to recoup their investment rather than deal with medical costs. The third owner was, she stopped, her hands clenching. He wasn't as bad, mostly wanted someone to organize his household, manage his staff. But he was also in financial trouble, and when the Viridian auction house offered to liquidate his assets, including me, he didn't hesitate. So I ended up on that platform, watching people bid on my future like I was furniture. Her violet eyes found his. "And then you bid 300,000 credits just to set me free. I still don't fully understand why." "Because you deserved better than what was happening to you," Marcus said simply. "Because the alternative, watching someone else buy you for purposes I don't want to think about, was unacceptable. Because sometimes you see something wrong and you have the power to do something about it, even if it's just one person, one time." "It was more than that to me," she said quietly. "You gave me back myself, my name, my choices, my future. Do you understand how rare that is? How many people would rather exploit an opportunity than create one for someone else?" Marcus didn't know how to respond to that, uncomfortable with praise for doing what seemed like the bare minimum of human decency. But Thissa wasn't done. "On my world, we have a word, Telvine. It translates roughly as soul debt, but not in an obligation sense. More like recognition that someone has touched your spirit so deeply that you're changed by knowing them." Her ears angled forward. That position he'd learned meant trust and affection. "You're my Telvine, Marcus. You saw me when I'd become invisible even to myself. You gave me freedom when everyone else saw property. You reminded me that I'm a person, not a commodity." "Thissa," he stopped, not sure what he was even trying to say. "I want to stay," she continued. "Not temporarily while I figure things out, but actually stay. As crew, if you'll have me. Chen says I'm getting good at navigation, and Rodriguez says my organizational systems are the best they've seen. I want to be useful, not just rescued. I want to contribute, not just survive." She met his eyes directly. "I'm choosing to stay. Is that okay?" Marcus felt something warm settle in his chest, satisfaction mixed with something more complicated. "It's more than okay. We'd be lucky to have you as crew. But only if that's really what you want, not what you think you should want because I helped you." "It's what I want," she said firmly. "This ship has become home in ways I wasn't expecting. Your crew has become," she paused, searching for words. "They've become people I care about, who care about me not as property or as a tool but as a person." Her ears shifted slightly. "And you've become someone important to me, someone I want to keep knowing." There was weight in how she said that last part, something Marcus felt echo in his own chest. He'd been trying not to examine too closely why he found himself looking for Thissa in common spaces, why conversations with her were the best part of his day, why the thought of her leaving the ship made him unreasonably disappointed. "You're important to me too," he said carefully. "I've enjoyed getting to know you, enjoyed watching you remember who you are underneath all the trauma. You're remarkable, Thissa." Her ears flushed slightly. A Sithari physiological response that Marcus had learned indicated emotional reaction, embarrassment or pleasure or something between them. "That means a lot coming from you," she said softly. "The man who risked financial ruin to free a stranger." "The financial ruin is only moderate," Marcus joked, trying to lighten the moment. "We're still eating regularly. That's something." She laughed, warm and genuine, and the sound made something in his chest feel too full. They talked late into the ship's night cycle, Thissa sharing more about Sithari culture and Marcus telling her about Earth, about his sister who was studying xenobiology, about choosing independent freight work over military or corporate careers. When she finally left his quarters, Marcus sat alone feeling the warmth of connection and the complication of realizing he was developing feelings that went well beyond person I helped into person I care about in personal, selfish ways that have nothing to do with altruism. And based on how Thissa had looked at him, on the warmth in her voice when she called him important, Marcus suspected she might be developing similar feelings, which was wonderful and terrifying and complicated, because how did you navigate a relationship with someone you'd literally purchased at an auction, even if you'd immediately freed them? How did you make sure they knew their feelings were their own choice, not obligation or trauma bonding or some complex psychological response to their rescuer? Those were questions for later, Marcus decided. For now, he was just glad Thissa was staying, glad she was healing, glad she'd chosen his ship and his crew and maybe him as part of her rebuilt life. The rest would figure itself out, he hoped. The news hit Galactic networks faster than Marcus had anticipated. A human cargo captain pays 300,000 credits at a Viridian auction just to immediately free the person he bought. That kind of story had legs, especially in a galaxy where the voluntary indenture system quietly relied on everyone looking the other way. It started with labor rights organizations, who seized on the story as proof that even participants in the system recognized it as slavery. Then mainstream news services picked it up, framing it as a feel-good human interest piece. Then political commentators started using it to challenge the Viridian Empire's legal fictions. Within 2 weeks, Marcus's name and Thissa's face were circulating across the civilized galaxy. The Viridian Empire issued statements about cultural misunderstandings and taking statements out of context. The auction house where Marcus had bought Thissa suddenly found itself under investigation by multiple jurisdictions. Civil rights activists started organizing protests outside similar facilities across Viridian space, and Marcus's communicator started exploding with messages. Some were supportive, people thanking him for taking a stand, offering donations to help offset his financial sacrifice, asking how they could get involved in fighting the system. Some were hostile, Viridian nationalists accusing him of cultural imperialism, buyers who'd lost their investments, when facilities shut down blaming him for their losses, people who'd profited from the system threatening retaliation. Many were heartbreaking, messages from people whose loved ones were trapped in similar situations, begging him to help, asking if he had resources to free more people, desperate for any hope that someone would do for their family members what Marcus had done for Thissa. He didn't. 300,000 credits had nearly bankrupted him, and even running lean, the Meridians' hope needed months to rebuild their finances to functional levels. But the publicity created a different problem. It meant Thissa's face was now attached to the story, her image from the auction house records circulating across news feeds, including in Viridian space, where she was technically still considered property that had been stolen. 2 months after the auction, Thissa found Marcus in his quarters, her expression anxious, ears angled back with stress. "They're going to try to reclaim me," she said without preamble. "The Viridian Empire. The publicity makes this personal for them now. They can't afford to let it stand, a human freeing one of their contracts and making them look bad across the galaxy." Marcus had been expecting this conversation, had been researching legal protections and Alliance jurisdictional rights since the story broke. "You're under Earth Alliance protection while you're on this ship," They can't legally touch you without causing a diplomatic incident. But I can't stay on your ship forever. She was pacing now, agitated. You're already struggling financially because of what you spent freeing me. I can't be an ongoing burden, especially now that I'm actively making your life more complicated. She took a breath, visibly steadying herself. I've been researching asylum options. There are a few planets outside Veridian jurisdiction that don't have extradition treaties. If you could drop me at one of them. Is that what you want? Marcus interrupted, to leave the ship and go somewhere alone. Her ears flicked in frustration. What I want doesn't matter. I'm trying to be practical. You saved me, you gave me my freedom, and I'm grateful. But I can't keep taking from you while giving nothing back except problems. You're not taking anything, Marcus said firmly. Thissa, you've become part of this crew. Chen constantly talks about how much easier navigation planning is with your help. Rodriguez says their medical inventory has never been better organized. Yuki actually enjoys ship maintenance more because you ask interesting questions. He paused. And I value having you here for reasons that have nothing to do with crew efficiency. Her pacing stopped, ears angling sharply forward. What reasons? This was the moment Marcus realized. The point where he either kept his feelings carefully professional or admitted what had been growing over the past 2 months. I enjoy your company, he said carefully. I look forward to our conversations. You make me laugh with your observations about human culture being beautifully chaotic. You challenge my thinking on basically everything. And I've started to care about you in ways that go beyond person I helped into territory that's probably inappropriate given our history, but I can't seem to help it. He met her eyes. I'd like you to stay, not because you owe me anything, not because I expect anything, but because I genuinely want you here, as crew, as friend. As he stopped, uncertain how much to admit. As what? She asked quietly, moving closer to him. As someone important to me personally, Marcus finished. Someone I care about beyond professional relationships. Someone I'm starting to have feelings for that complicate everything. He forced himself to be completely honest. But only if that's what you want too. Your freedom means your choice always, including the choice to leave if that's better for you. I won't pressure you or make you feel obligated. Your autonomy matters more than my feelings. Thissa was studying his face with those violet eyes, her expression cycling through surprise and something else, something softer. You freed me, she said softly. You gave me back my autonomy. You spent months showing me that kindness without cost is possible, that choices can be mine, that I'm worth being treated as a person rather than property. She stepped closer, raising her hand tentatively to touch his face. And now you're telling me you have feelings for me, but still framing it as my choice. Still prioritizing my freedom over your wants. Because your freedom is more important, Marcus said firmly, even as his heart pounded at her proximity, at the gentle touch of her hand. I helped you to give you autonomy, not to create a situation where you felt obligated to return affection. If you want to leave, I'll help you. If you want to stay as just crew, that's fine too. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it. Her ears angled fully forward, that position of trust and affection, and she smiled in a way that made his chest feel too small for his heart. I want to stay, she said. Not because I owe you, not because I'm afraid of being alone, not because I feel obligated. I want to stay because this ship has become home, because your crew has become my crew. Because you, she moved closer still until they were nearly touching. Because you became someone I care about deeply, someone I'm choosing not as my rescuer or my owner or my savior, but as a partner, as an equal, as someone I'm developing feelings for that I'm pretty sure are mutual. They're very mutual, Marcus confirmed, barely breathing. Then I'm choosing this, she said firmly. Choosing to stay, choosing you. Choosing us if that's what you're offering. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because somewhere over these months, you stopped being the man who freed me and started being the man I want to build a future with. Marcus felt relief and joy flood through him, warm and overwhelming. "I'm offering," he managed. "Definitely offering. I've been trying not to hope too hard, but Thissa, having you here, getting to know you, watching you remember your strength, you've become one of the best parts of my life." She kissed him then, tentative and careful, and he returned it with equal caution, both of them navigating this new territory with the same respect for autonomy and choice that had defined everything since that auction house. When they pulled apart, she was smiling fully, radiant and free. "So we're doing this, actually doing this." "If you want to," Marcus confirmed. "But Thissa, the Viridian Empire is going to keep trying. The publicity means they can't let this stand. Staying with me means staying in danger." "Then we'll handle it together," she said firmly. "As partners, as crew, as whatever we're building here. I'm not running anymore, Marcus. I'm choosing to stand and fight, with you beside me." Over the following weeks, they made it official in every way that mattered. Thissa's crew status was formalized through Earth Alliance channels, her documentation processed as a free citizen rather than escaped property. She worked with Alliance legal advocates to file formal asylum applications, making her protected status explicit and public. The Viridian Empire tried multiple approaches to reclaim her: legal challenges, diplomatic pressure, even a barely veiled threat from a corporate representative who found himself escorted off the Meridian's Hope by Chen and Rodriguez with extreme prejudice. Each attempt was met with Marcus and Thissa standing together, firmly stating that she was a free person under Alliance protection, and any attempt at recapture would be considered an act of aggression. The publicity that had initially been a problem became their greatest protection. The galaxy was watching, and the Viridian Empire couldn't risk the diplomatic fallout of forcibly reclaiming someone who'd become a symbol of resistance against their labor trafficking system. Thissa gave interviews to news organizations, telling her story in her own words, putting a face and a voice to the countless beings still trapped in that system. Marcus stood beside her during these interviews, making it clear that freeing her had been the easiest choice he'd ever made, and that if the galaxy wanted change, they needed to demand better from governments that profited from treating people as commodities. Civil rights organizations used their story as proof that the system was indefensible. Several planets passed new laws banning participation in voluntary indenture markets. The Viridian Empire found itself increasingly isolated, forced to defend practices they'd previously hidden behind euphemisms. But in the quiet moments, away from publicity and politics, Marcus and Thissa were simply two people building something genuine from impossible foundations, learning each other's rhythms and preferences, navigating a relationship built on absolute respect for autonomy and choice. Thissa taught him about Sithari art and cultural traditions while they sat in the observation deck watching stars stream past. Marcus shared Earth music with her, laughing at her reactions to humanity's chaotic artistic expression. They learned to navigate physical intimacy with patience and communication, making sure every step forward was